Hello and welcome to another anime lore and theory video. I'm Shergok, your host, and today we are going to take a closer look at what would happen if Einon would have arrived at the new world at level 1. And in today's episode, we take a closer look at his alliance with Rena and the benefits that this alliance brought for him. But before we're going to take a closer look at any of this, let me quickly thank my Patreons for supporting this channel, as well as say thanks to all users of the YouTube thanks function for making one-time donations. And with that said, let's get to the topic at hand. Hurried steps echoed across the marketplace of Einon as the last remaining Imperial Knight, Nazami Anek, escorted his Emperor, protected by 2 shields and guided by a close friend of his own mentor, a polite young man with blonde hair who had once introduced himself to Jerknif as Quaesasia Quintia. The last of the 4 Imperial Knights still remained tense, scanning the situation carefully. Despite the support of the slain theocracy, their scripture, and their priests, despite an unprecedented collaboration between the temples of the 4 gods and the theocracy's 6, Einon had been in the hands of the undead for too long. The city had been drenched in negative energy by Zurnon and his foul creatures. And this was so deep, the corruption so omnipresent, that the undead still continued to spawn, albeit weakened and at a reduced rate. Something the people cheering Emperor Jerknif on are blissfully unaware of. With his guard up, Nazami stayed close to the Emperor as they crossed the market square, passing by newly reopened shops and crowds of newly arrived commoners, now watching in respectful silence. Their gaze filled with cautious hope followed the Emperor's every move. Upon reaching the marketplace center, Emperor Jerknif began to address the gathered masses, warning them of a great danger that had befallen the rest of the kingdom. The scent of crystal clear fresh water, meadows, and flowers filled the spring air. A delegation of mermen returned to the northern freshwater ocean before the rising sun could harm their skin. At the same time, Rena prepared for her own departure. Within just a few weeks, she had implemented an impressive reform program, driven by a wave of euphoria and hope for a better future. The nobility, now fearing a retribution from a crown that had regained its strength, divided and weakened by their failed rebellion, reluctantly conceded parts of their privileges. In exchange, they hoped for closer ties with the royal family, and more than just an invitation to participate in the kingdom's emerging economic recovery. Likewise, the aristocrat of the coastal city Einon and his friends and fellow nobles began their short journey home, while Marquis Raven, who accompanied Queen Rena, also split ways alongside the journey for his own city of Evileye, and they carried with them a newly signed trade agreement with the mermen, ensuring a steady supply of fish and a secure northern flank of the kingdom, now that the neutrality pact with the mermen had been signed, thus preventing any imperial naval forces from crossing this formerly neutral territory. So effectively, this underwater empire acted as a buffer against the overwater empire. And Rena and her entourage did not only leave empty-handed either. In exchange for deeper economic cooperation and official recognition of the merfolk as a nation, thus protecting them from adventure attacks and granting them a toll-free passage through the kingdom's rivers to reach the Western Sea, Einon received an item of immense value: an orb of obliteration, an artifact capable of unleashing widespread destruction through the release of negative energy, with a 20% chance of turning fallen foes into the undead. However, Einon had no intention of using the orb to decimate enemy soldiers in the upcoming battle. Instead, he sought to use it to transform himself into a Night Lich, refining his previously unfocused character build. After Einon shared some of his knowledge of Yggdrasil with Rena, who in her fascination misunderstood it as a fundamental insight into the laws of physics, was able to assist him in his training. His magical abilities, honed under the guidance of the Magician's Guild's best instructors, had been greatly advanced, and his training accelerated. In return, Einon provided them with 2 elder liches, crafted from the corpses of the fallen Imperial Knights. And the best part about it was that this orb also absorbed undead energies from its surroundings. Not only could it cleanse entire battlefields of negative energy, but Evileye could also be completely purified, just like the Cuts plane Einon once used to train on, effectively recharging its energy. And with such another massive amount of negative energy, Einon could level up by half a dozen levels, and perhaps finally become an undead overlord again. He couldn't help but form a motionless grin as he thought about this, on his bare-boned, skeletalized face. All that remained for the powerful ritual sacrifice to work was something other than negative energy to sacrifice. In the royal chambers, another blonde woman lay in light armor on the queen's king-sized bed. Her thoughts fixated on Rena's body, and how she would pierce it, penetrate it, with her stillet. A sadistic grin crept onto her face, followed by a moment of silence and a long sigh. Clementine knew that the queen, who was preparing for war, would not always stick to her usual routines and schedule. But all of the dozens of assassins from Yangia that she intercepted sent to end the life of Princess Rena, and to take over the artifact that she used to control the undead, all of them were certain that she would return to her chambers tonight, after bidding farewell to her undead servant far, far outside of the castle. And this much was also revealed by her stillet that entered all of the assassins, with the charm person spell casting while it penetrated their flesh. Reflexively, Clementine clung to her dagger, because she almost had forgotten it one time in the vet rooms, while observing her prey. And while she was lost in her thoughts, another long sigh escaped her lips. Rena would just not show up, but at least the nearby crackling fireplace kept her comfortably warm. Then Clementine finally heard the heavy footstep of her guard. In a flash, she clung to the ceiling, right above the entrance. As Clymer, so she thought her dog's name was, opened the door, he would lose his own sword arm, followed by his very own princess turned queen. With a grin, she shot down from the ceiling and hovered mid-air. Her opponent had long blonde hair and was petite, but too small to be Rena. And the magic didn't seem to come from the artifact either. Moreover, Clementine knew from her time with Khajiit that an undead orb wouldn't grant such arcane abilities, because it was purely filled with undead negative energy. But if this wasn't Rena, then who? Stride of Wind, ability boost, great ability boost, magic fortress. Just in time, Clementine unleashed all of her abilities, only for a crystal spear to come soaring towards her. She barely managed to deflect it with her stillet, her long dagger, but the supposed magical weapon shattered like an ordinary item. But that didn't make sense. She had cast Charm Person with this magic item, with her dagger. It was imbued into the very dagger's own essence, and that meant someone must have switched her weapons, and only one of the top 3 assassins of Yangia could have pulled that off. But if this was true, why had Charm Person worked? Greater magic fortification! With the fort, Clementine's magical defense finally became strong enough to stop hoovering. Now she understood. Her blades had been swapped, and all of this was just a trap for her. And Landfall, the vampire princess standing before her, must have been the one to cast the spell, hidden away, turned invisible, with her considerable magic power. And she also must have altered the sound of her footsteps, so the Blue Roses must have intercepted an assassin from Yangia as well. That also meant that Tina and Tia must be nearby. Clementine still remembered some things from her time back in the Black Scripture and the whereabouts of Landfall, and that much Renan also has confirmed. With lightning speed she lunged at Evileye, letting her other daggers fall as well, before grabbing the fire poker from the nearby fireplace, and in a fluid motion, driving it straight through the surprised vampire prince's stomach. The force of her attack shattered the door, sending a landfall crashing into a nearby wall, pinning her in place. At the same moment, two skeletal hands seized Clementine's head, holding it tightly. Swiftly, she grabbed the skeletal claws, holding her head, and pushed against them with all of her force. The fingers, seemingly capable of crushing her skull just a moment ago, began to bend backwards, with an audible crack, as the bones of the wrist began snapping. Clementine refused to be held down by some undead caster. If she just could break his hands completely, she'd be free to escape through the nearby window. Drain touch. Suddenly her strength and life force began to drain away. The very wrist bones of Einon gone, which had just been broken moments ago, began to heal instantly, while her own fingers bent backwards until they started snapping with a sickening crunch. In a panic, Clementine pushed off the ground, swinging herself up and over the undead being, yet her hands were still trapped in its claws. So she aimed to kick down the window, intending to shatter the glass and then escape. Even if she couldn't break free in mid-air, she dragged the undead down with her, letting it brutally crash into the ground, while her cat-like agility would soften her own fall. But instead of shattering the glass, she felt the bones on her toes snap against the magical crystal. "Hold, person!" The voice of the vampire princess echoed through the palace corridor, and as her limbs stiffened, magical pressure threatened to squeeze her, and the undead draining more and more of her life force, darkness consumed her vision. Nazami Einon, far from being relaxed, could at least breathe a little easier, now that they were inside the city hall of the fortress city of Irantel, far away from the chaotically cheering crowds. Jerknev's context in Yanjia would inform the theocracy about the still fugitive Clementine, should they attempt to flee the very own kingdom where she was last been seen. But in exchange, the Sunlight Scripture would also intervene on the side of the Empire, dealing with the undead now embedded within the newly expanded royal army of the Kingdom of Retold, strengthened by clerics and paladins from the temples of the Empire. Jerknev understood how much was at stake if Einon, who had seemingly taken over the Kingdom of Retold under the leadership of Queen Rena, was allowed to grow and flourish in the kingdom, especially now that they had reinforcements from another powerful undead, even through their Paradane, would struggle to contain a single one of the many undead that were already being produced at a record speed. They needed to act now and crush this emerging power before it becomes too strong. Because if they waited another month or so, Rena might be able to turn the tide, and then the kingdom could pose a serious threat to the Empire and perhaps to the theocracy of Slain. Now, while the wounds were still fresh from the civil war, they had to strike first. Urgently, the barracks and storage houses were filled once again with soldiers and supplies for the advance into the newly founded undead kingdom under Queen Rena. And with that said, another episode of Eins at Level 1 comes to an end. And in the next episode, the great battle against the Empire begins. Just like in that one Heart of Iron mod. And with that said, please check out my German channel, my fantasy channel, and if you don't want to listen to my voice or accent but are still interested in the things I have to say, I have also made an AI channel, narrated by almost a woman, where I use AI voiceovers for my videos, and these channels are all linked down in the video description. Also, please check out my Patreon if you want to support me beyond just leaving a like or sub. And with that said, I say thank you very much for watching, thanks to my Patreons for supporting this channel, and as usual, I say my special thanks to Order Daddy Order, ASK, Bad Girl Ye, Bad Burrito 316, Beezer, Ben C, Brandon S, Brandon D, Chrissy, Crowley 0221, Sia, Crystal Prime, Dead Slime, Death is Mercy, Deathless Dragonlord, Demon Xenomorph 1987, Devin Downen, Ding Dong, Din Pep, Dragonlord Placidus Saxophone, Duckwagon, Dunkler Krieger, Dystopia, Dystopia II, Enigmatic Unicorn, Feralchivan, Guy with That Head, Hector Marino, Hoss, Huster, Jacob G, Jana B, Jason, J. Morris, Chromius, Kyle R, Lee K. Long, Legendarius, Le Louche Britannia with a Mustache, Lexus Fox, Lord Nishikian Rai, Lord Touch Me, Loverazor, Merowek, Mr. Shoes, Mr. Tweaker, Michael R, Michael Y, Nope, Oh Hell No, Normal Toad, O'Kill, Overlord General Gasper, Paddy Pentum, Personage, Ruru, Primus 11, Rhinomere, Q&A Caracos P, Shergox's Daddy, Shadow Lightning Wolf, Shrine Keeper, Sir Axolotl, Super Tier Magic Batista Bomb, Supreme Cheese, Staris, Ted, Texas Deer, The Orc Warboss, Rocket Smasher, T.E. Wang, Vash Hawkeye, Vegito27, Venture Fanatic, Wilhelm, Xenokai, and Sonagon. Thanks guys. Anyway, have a nice day, and I hope to see you all again soon on my next video.